one day somebody does something unspeakable to someone else, to someone you hardly knew, and you do something about it because you can.
This story comes to us from ProPublica.org. When Immigration and Customs Enforcement officers, or ICE, stormed through Santa Ana, California in June, panicked calls flooded into the city's emergency response system, or their 911 system. Recordings of those calls obtained by ProPublica captured some of the terror residents felt as they watched masked men ambush people and force them into unmarked cars. That's ICE, man. In some cases, the men wore plain clothes and refused to identify themselves. They don't have name tags, they don't have badges, nothing. There was no way to confirm whether they were immigration agents or imposters. In 6 of the calls to Santa Ana police, residents described what they were seeing as kidnappings. They said, "He's bleeding," one caller said about a person he saw yanked from a car wash lot and beaten. They dumped him into a white van. It doesn't say ICE. That's what they said, the caller. One woman's voice shook as she asked, what kind of police go around without license plates? All the time. And that's a violation of the state of California's vehicle code. And then this from another. Should we just run from them? During a tense public meeting days later, Mayor Valerie Amascua and the city council asked their police chief whether there was anything they could do to rein in federal agents, even if only to ban the use of masks. The answer was a resounding no, which is not true. There is something you can do. Plus, filing complaints with the Department of Homeland Security was likely to go nowhere because the office that once handled those complaints has been dismantled. There was little chance of holding individual agents accountable for alleged abuse because, among other hurdles, there was no way to reliably learn their identities. And that's why they do it. Since then, Amascua, 58, said she has reluctantly accepted the reality there are virtually no limits on what federal agents can do to achieve President Donald Trump's goal of mass deportations. And that's where we're at right now. Nothing we can do. Oh, well. Santa Ana has proven to be a template for much larger raids and even more violent arrests in Chicago and elsewhere. It's almost like he tries it out in this country and says, it worked there, so now let me send them here. Current and former national security officials share the mayor's concerns. They describe the legions of masked immigration officers operating in near total anonymity. What do you mean near total? They are anonymous. On the orders of the president as the crossing of a line that had long set the United States apart from the world's most repressive regimes. ICE, in their view, has become an unfettered and unaccountable national police force. True. The transformation, the officials say, unfolded rapidly and in plain sight. Trump's Department of Homeland Security appointees swiftly dismantled civil rights guardrails, encouraged agents to wear masks, threatened groups and state governments that stood in their way, and then made so many arrests that the influx overwhelmed lawyers trying to defend immigrants taken out of state or out of the country. And although they are reluctant to predict the future, the current and former officials worry that this force assembled from federal agents across the country could eventually be turned against any groups the administration labels a threat. One former senior Department of Homeland Security official who was involved in oversight said that what is happening on American streets today gives me goosebumps. Speaking on condition of anonymity for fear of retaliation, the official rattled off scenes that once would have triggered investigations. Says accosting people outside of their immigration court hearings where they're showing up and trying to do the right thing and then hauling them off to an immigration jail in the middle of the country where they can't access loved ones or speak to counsel. Bands of masked men apprehending people in broad daylight in the streets and hauling them off. Disappearing people to a third country, to a prison where there's a documented record of serious torture and human rights abuse. The former official paused and then went on. We're at an inflection point in history right now, and it's frightening. Although ICE is conducting itself out in the open, yeah, right, even inviting conservative social media influencers to accompany its agents on high profile raids, the agency operates in darkness. Yes, it does. The identities of DHS officers, their salaries, and their operations have long been withheld for security reasons and generally exempted from disclosure under the Freedom of Information Act. However, there were officers within DHS created to hold agents and their supervisors accountable for their actions on the job. They do not do it. The Office for Civil Rights and Civil Liberties, created by Congress and led largely by lawyers, investigated allegations of rape and unlawful searches from both the public and within DHS ranks, for instance. Egregious conduct was referred to the Justice Department. The CRCL office that I mentioned had limited powers. Former staffers say their job was to protect DHS by ensuring personnel followed the law and addressed civil rights concerns. They do not do that anymore. Still, it was effective in stalling rush deportations or ensuring detainees had access to phones and lawyers. And even when its investigations didn't fix problems, CRCL provided an accounting of allegations and a measure of transparency for Congress and the public. The office processed thousands of complaints, 3,000 in fiscal year 2023 alone, ranging from allegations of lack of access to medical treatment to reports of sexual assault at detention centers. Former staffers said around 600 complaints were open when work was suspended. The administration has gutted most of the office. What's left of it was led, at least for a while, by a 29-year-old White House appointee who helped craft Project 2025, the right-wing blueprint that broadly calls for the curtailment of civil rights enforcement. Meanwhile, ICE is enjoying a windfall in resources. On top of its annual operating budget of $10 billion a year, the so-called One Big Beautiful Bill included an added $7.5 billion a year for the next 4 years for recruiting and retention. As part of its hiring blitz, the agency has dropped age, training, and education standards and has offered recruits signing bonuses as high as $50,000. So now they're hiring stupid people. Supercharging this law enforcement agency, and at the same time you have oversight being eliminated, said a former DHS official. He said, "This is very scary." Michelle Brognier, a longtime human rights attorney who directed DHS's ombudsman office during the Biden administration, said Trump's adherence to the authoritarian playbook is not even subtle. ICE, their secret police, is their tool, Brognier said. Once they have that power, which they have now, there's nothing stopping them from using it against its citizens. Tricia McLaughlin, the DHS Assistant Secretary for Public Affairs, refuted descriptions of ICE as a secret police force. Shut up. She called such comparisons the kind of smear and demonization that led to the recent attack on an ICE facility in Texas, in which a gunman targeted an ICE transport van and shot 3 detained migrants, 2 of them fatally, before killing himself. In a written response to ProPublica, McLaughlin dismissed the current and former national security officials and scholars interviewed by ProPublica as far-left champagne socialists who haven't seen ICE enforcement up close. If they had, she wrote, they would know when our heroic law enforcement officers, conduct operations, they clearly identify themselves as law enforcement while wearing masks to protect themselves from being targeted by highly sophisticated gangs and other criminals. McLaughlin said the recruiting blitz is not compromising standards. She wrote that the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center is ready for 11,000 new hires by the beginning of next year, and that training has been streamlined and boosted by technology. She said our workforce have never stopped learning. White House spokesperson Abigail Jackson also praised ICE conduct and accused Democrats of making dangerous, untrue smears. ICE officers act heroically to enforce the law, arrest criminal aliens, and protect American communities with the utmost professionalism, Jackson said. Get out of here. Anyone pointing the finger at law enforcement officers instead of the criminals are simply doing the bidding of criminal illegal aliens and fueling false narratives that lead to violence. What if the law enforcement officers are acting like criminals? But Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, the Trump pick who fired nearly the entire civil rights oversight staff, said the move was in response to CRCL functioning as internal adversaries that slow down operations, according to a DHS spokesperson. Trump also eliminated the department's Office of Citizenship and Immigration Services Ombudsman, which was charged with flagging inhumane conditions at ICE detention facilities, where many of the apprehended immigrants are held. The office was resurrected after a lawsuit and court order, though it's sparsely staffed. The hobbling of the office comes as the White House embarks on an aggressive expansion of detention sites with an eye toward repurposing old jails of building new ones with names that telegraph harsh conditions. Alligator Alcatraz in the Florida Everglades, built by the state and operated in partnership with DHS, or the Cornhusker Clink in Nebraska. It's a shocking situation to be in that I don't think anybody anticipated a year ago, said Erica France. She's a political scientist at Michigan State University who studies authoritarianism. She said, we might have thought that we were going to see a slide, but I don't think anybody anticipated how quickly it would transpire. And now people at all levels are scrambling to figure out how to push back. France and other scholars who studied anti-democratic political systems in other countries said there are numerous examples in which ICE's activities appear cut from an authoritarian playbook. Among them was the detention of Tufts University doctoral student Rumeysa Öztürk, who was apprehended after co-writing an op-ed for the campus paper that criticized the school's response to the war in Gaza. ICE held her incommunicado for 24 hours and then shuffled her through 3 states before jailing her in Louisiana. They said, the thing that got me into the topic of maybe ICE is a secret police force, said Lee Morgenbesser, an Australian political science professor who studies authoritarianism. He said it was the daylight snatching of the Tufts student. Morgenbesser was also struck by the high-profile instances of ICE detaining elected officials who attempted to stand in their way. How dare they? Among them, New York City Comptroller Brad Lander, he was arrested, was detained for demanding a judicial warrant from ICE. And U.S. Senator Alex Padilla, who was forcibly removed from a DHS press conference. Remember that one? And David Sklansky, a Stanford Law School professor, who researches policing and democracy, said it appears that ICE's agents are allowed to operate with complete anonymity. It's not just that people can't see the faces of the officers, Sklansky said. The officers aren't wearing shoulder insignia or name tags. Nothing. U.S. District Judge William G. Young, a Ronald Reagan appointee, recently pointed out that use of masked law enforcement officers had long been considered anathema to American ideals. In a blistering ruling against the administration's protests of pro-Palestinian protesters, he wrote, to us, masks are associated with cowardly desperados and the despised Ku Klux Klan. In all our history, we have never tolerated an armed, masked secret police. The Trump administration has said it will appeal that ruling. The fallout is being felt in places like Hays County, Texas, not far from Austin, where ICE apprehended 47 people, including 9 children, during a birthday celebration in the early morning of April 1st. The agency's only disclosure about the raid in Dripping Springs describes the operation as part of a year-long investigation targeting members and associates believed to be part of the Venezuelan transnational gang, Tren de Agua. 6 months later, the county's top elected official told ProPublica the federal government has ignored his attempts to get answers. We're not told why they took them, and we're not told where they took them, said County Judge Ruben Becerra, a Democrat. He says, by definition, that's a kidnapping. In the raid, a Texas trooper secured a search warrant that allowed law enforcement officers to breach the home, an Airbnb rental on a vast stretch of land in the Hill County, or Hill Country. Becerra told ProPublica he believes the suspicion of drugs at the party was a pretense to pull people out of their house so ICE officers who lacked a warrant could take them into custody. The Texas Department of Public Safety did not respond to a request for comment. The Trump administration is yet to produce evidence supporting claims of gang involvement, said Karen Munoz. She's a civil rights attorney helping families track down their relatives who were jailed or deported. Now, while some court documents are sealed, nothing in the public record verifies the gang affiliation DHS cited as the cause for the birthday party raid. Said there's no evidence released at all that any person kidnapped at that party was a member of any organized criminal group, said Munoz. McLaughlin, the DHS spokesperson, did not respond to any questions about Hays County and other raids where families and attorneys allege a lack of transparency and due process. Months after ICE's widely publicized raids, fear continues to envelope Santa Ana, California, a majority Hispanic city with a large immigrant population. Amezcua, the mayor, said the raids have complicated local policing and rendered parents afraid to pick up their children from school. The city manager, a California-born citizen and Latino, carries with him 3 government IDs, including a passport. And then it goes on from there. It's pretty long. It keeps going from there. I'm going to stop here. But the one thing I wanted to get back to was the anonymity of these ICE agents. That's really my biggest issue with ICE at this point. Well, there's a couple issues. One is they're stopping like the California-born U.S. citizen who carries 3 IDs. Why? Because they're stopping brown people and going, hey, you come with us. I'm an American citizen. Prove it. You know, when did you have to prove you're an American citizen? I mean, when you go into the DMV or when you come into the country, like let's say you go to Mexico on vacation for a week and you come back, they're going to say, do you have a passport or birth certificate? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, of course. Or you go to the DMV or the Social Security office or any of those. Yeah, they're going to ask for documents. But to just stop somebody on the street and go, hey, come here. You got brown skin. Are you an American citizen? Didn't they do that in 1938? No, I mean, didn't they? Are you a Jew? No, I'm a German. You must show your papers or you will be put on the train. We think you're a Jew. You know, remember that? Yeah, we're seeing that today with American citizens that just have to have, you know, olive colored or brown skin. You know, if your skin's a little darker, well, you must be an immigrant. No, I was born here 37 years ago in the hospital right down the road. You know, that's one of my issues with ICE. Then the other one, and people are saying, oh, they're not doing that. Stop. I've seen videos, bro. I mean, if it wasn't on video, I might question it and go, are they really doing that? I've seen the videos and I'm sitting there going, my jaw drop. Are you kidding me right now? That's a U.S. citizen. And they proved, that person on video proved they were a U.S. citizen, and you're going, why are you stopping? You know, I digress. My other issue is this, the anonymity of these agents. And people say, dude, come on, it says ICE on the back, or it says police on the back. I could get those off Amazon. You can go to Amazon and request a vest that says police on the back, or deputy, or Homeland Security. You can get those from Amazon, dude. You can get anything you want from Amazon. You just order it. So for all we know, those could be gang members from like some Mexican cartel snatching people off the street. We don't know that. They could have purchased that through Amazon. We're tired of ICE being anonymous. We want to know who you are, law enforcement.